Howdy, 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 everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I am Pete Bickford. I am the creator of ComicBase and your host for this next hour or so, if we can keep things going. I'm just off vacation, so I'm counting on you guys to fill in the questions, because honestly, I don't have a lot of news, because I'm just, otherwise I'll just be jabbering about all the, beers I drank and all the brew pubs I went to. I'm seeing some really, really strange framing here in the live stream. Are you guys getting just like the top end of my head here, or is this like just a crazy framing on the preview window on YouTube? I'm not sure, because I'm seeing what my program is putting out, but I'm not sure what y'all are getting. Let's see here. Let me know, because if I gotta frame it way back, I will. If you guys are just only seeing like the part top of my hand, let me know. Anyway, okay, I look fine, excellent. So if man, I wonder if I can do this. If I show you over on the computer monitor, this is what the computer monitor says I'm putting out there. So you see like this much of my head, Anyway, and a picture of a donut robot in the back. So. Man, crazy. Okay, we're just gonna roll with it. I'm gonna ignore the YouTube studio monitor, and I'm just gonna play with what I got coming off of my own AV monitors. We'll take it from there. Anyway, hey guys. I spent the last week in Florida. I told folks, let me back it up here. Every year, doing this ComicBase thing, it's a little bit like farming. It's you spend half the year just doing nothing but just heads down programming work and just really just coding for 80 hours a week, and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then when it's all done, you ship, and there's a lot of activity around the shipping, everything like that. And then that settles down, and then you're actually able to enjoy your life a little bit until the whole cycle starts again. And so anyway, I had told people, guys, I've been, I came off the 2020 release, which was a massive 4-year effort. We went almost straight into the 2021 after we got through all the transition issues, getting people over from the old antiquated ComicBase 2017 architecture over into the new 2020 stuff. And then the COOF hit, and so I was telling people, it's like, guys, when we get a break after 2021 is shipped and everything's pretty stable, I'm just going to be gone for a while. And so that's I'm just going to literally just take off in a car and drive, and I'll let you know where I end up. I'll try to check in once a day, and hopefully you guys can keep the place around while I'm gone. And everyone did a great job, so I thank you very much for everyone doing that. What I did is I went down to Florida, and I basically sat on the beach, drank some beers, saw the brew pubs I could, went to every comic shop I went into, checked out both the major college campuses, saw both the Seminoles and the Gators home bases. Drove all the way down. I'd been to Miami a few times, but I went down to Fort Myers Beach, and basically just any place I went down the entire trip was just kind of like, well, what seems like fun today. And it's the kind of vacation you really never get to take as an adult, where you've got nobody else with you and you have no plans, and you just tell people when you're going to be back. So anyway, that was a ton of fun. I'm really glad I did. Have some interesting things, because I got a lot of time to think and check out new stuff, and I'm really glad that all worked out. And if we get a chance, I'll probably share a few insights I had over the time. Anyway, on to other things. One other quick check is, how's the sound? Because one thing I found when I came back is the sound settings on my computer are all completely goofed up, and I spent about an hour just pulling cables and trying to get everything running right. It sounded okay to me, but I don't know how it sounds to you guys on the stream. I didn't have a chance to do a live stream test. So let me know, is it too hot, too low, and I can make some adjustments on that one. But because usually I leave the knobs and I do not touch them. So but anyway, hopefully it all sounds okay. All right, so other things like that. Blu-rays are going out this week. So that is the ComicBase 4K Archive Edition. The new edition, we repressed them with all 690, I want to say 694,000 pictures, plus or minus a couple, are on the new ones. And if you are a old school ComicBase Blu-ray Archive Edition subscriber, the deal back in the day was we promised you got 4 quarterly updates as part of your subscription price, which cost quite a bit more than the 4K does these days. Anyway, part of what that price was is it was us, mailing you discs every quarter. So if we still owe you one, look for your mailbox, and we should be sending that to you coming up. As mentioned before, the new 4K archive editions, we're trying to get away from that because as much fun as it was mailing out just a crap ton of Blu-rays every quarter, it was a lot of work, and and it got kind of expensive, and moving forward, we thought, well, hey, if we could just really beef up our download capabilities so people could just download the stuff they want as they go, then we wouldn't have to do all that work, and it would save us a couple weeks out of our year, and then we could drop the price by $50, which is what we did. So so the new 4K guys, you don't get us sending you new discs every quarter. You saved a lot of money when you bought it, but if we owed you from before, we're going to keep sending you discs until we no longer owe you discs. So that's coming up. Now, if you are of a mind to, and you have the new 4K archive edition, look to the registration links in a couple of days. Don't look right now, but in a couple of days we'll be refreshing the download links for the archive editions for the 4K archive. So if you haven't been downloading them using Sidekick every week, you could catch up, and we'll have everything new that was on there. If you have been downloading them off of Sidekick, honestly, what you got is even better than what's is going to be in those archive packages, because the weekly downloads aren't capped at the size of a physical Blu-ray disc, like the old Blu-ray archives are. So one thing we did this last time out is we allowed the downloaded versions to not only be not watermarked, but we allowed them to be a little bit bigger in terms of the image quality than we could do and still fit them on even a 50 gig Blu-ray disc. So if you've been downloading every week, stick with what you got. It's better. If you haven't, and you just need to fill in pictures, well, that's something you can do as well. Okay, let me do a quick check of the chat. Okay, the sound is fine too. Sweet. All right, we're rocking. Okay, other things that are going on. There are going to be some updates coming to our database engine coming up in the next, I'm going to say 72 hours. We want to be super careful when we do this one. If you guys have ever been involved with like web commerce or things like that, there's websites, there's servers, there's internet connections, but the thing behind everything is the database. And the database is getting a brain transplant later on. We're going to be throwing some more powerful software and hardware at it. It should be a very straightforward in-place upgrade. We're moving to a more powerful version of SQL Server, so we can throw more horsepower at your, serving up your database queries. That said, we, because we're in IT, we're nervous as anything. We are backing up everything under the sun. We, are having backup, redundancies upon redundancies, etc. Because we want to make sure that not only is there's going to be a couple minutes of downtime minimum, but we want to keep that to the very minimum we possibly can. And also, we want to make sure that if anything goes wrong whatsoever, we can roll back in a hurry. So anyway, that's coming up in the next 72 hours or so. Hopefully, I thought about it, and it's not going to make any sense me telling you when it's going to be, because it's not going to be a long enough scheduled outage to make any plans along, along your day and everything. It'll probably be done in the middle, as close to the middle of the night as we can, or at least for Americans. If you're in Australia, it'll probably be right in the middle of your darn work day. But we're going to try to keep it down, and honestly, if everything goes well, maybe 5-10 minutes. So, and when that's done, hopefully everything should work faster. Everything from queries on Atomic Avenue to just even like checking your login information and the ComicBase website and so forth. It might not be enough to make a big difference, but it is going to allow us to do some new cool things in the future. So anyway, that is coming. Let's see here. All right, other things. Had a question come in earlier on about sharing ComicBase on 2 computers, so I thought I'd address this one. The question basically is, I have ComicBase in one place, I want to share it in another place. What is the best way to do it? Now, ComicBase, a couple things. So the official line, I got to tell you, is ComicBase is licensed for one person on as many computers as you feel like sticking it on. And as long as you don't try to have 2 computers hitting the same database at the same time, everything's ducky. So there, Now, in the past, ComicBase was based on a database engine called Access, which there is no reason to love Microsoft Access whatsoever. It's the database engine was called Jet, but the you guys, if you've used any Microsoft products, will know it is the same database engine that underlies Microsoft Access. The biggest problem we always had with Microsoft Access, other than being it was a little bit slow, is it had a 2 gigabyte file size limit, which we were constantly bumping into and having to constantly do compacting on and things like that. We've switched away from that. Everything got much better with ComicBase 2020 and so forth. Very happy with it. Much more stable, more wonderful, and everything else. But one thing we did lose along the way is SQLite. You used to be able to kind of abuse Microsoft Access in a way where you could have more than one person hitting the database at once, and it would get sluggish, but it would still work to have multiple people updating at the same time. That is less true with SQLite, which is the database that ComicBase 2020 is built on. The reason is SQLite can have more than one person looking at stuff at the same time, but if you ever need to change stuff in the database, it locks the entire database at once. So it doesn't lock an individual record. So it isn't like, I'm changing my quantity of Iron Man 275, and so Iron Man 275 is busy. Nobody else can use it until I'm done, making my change. That was the way Microsoft Access worked. Downside of Microsoft Access, if you did enough of this stuff, it would, was prone to doing things like corrupting the database. But still, for the most part, it would work just fine. We used it in the office, that way all the time. SQLite does not corrupt itself this way, but one of the ways it simplifies its life and works very quickly is that when you're using changing Microsoft Iron Man number 275, it says for that microsecond that I'm changing Iron Man 275, the entire database is off limits to changes. And so if I'm over here and I'm trying to change Hulk 183 at the same time, this guy just gets told, I'm sorry, you can't do it, the database is locked. It's just a hard stop. Whereas beforehand, as long as you weren't changing the same record, both of you could work at the same time. So as a practical matter, it's going to be more problematic if you think two different locations are going to be changing data. And like I say, it goes beyond what the license on ComicBase does anyway, so it shouldn't be a consideration, because I'm sure everyone always does everything completely according to the software license, right? But anyway, if, let's say, however, you've got the situation where you have one copy of ComicBase, but maybe your comics are downstairs and you work upstairs, and you'd rather be working upstairs most of the time unless you're working on your comics. So it's still all you. One person's going to hit it, and one person's going to change data at any given time. But what's the best way to put my database in a place so that I can use it no matter where I'm hitting it? And you got a couple of options. First option is because the database is just a file. It's just, imagine like if it's a word processing document, like a letter to grandma, right? If I was working on it on my upstairs computer and then I've had additional thoughts and I want to work on it on my laptop someplace else, you would copy that thing onto from one computer to another, maybe use a USB stick or a network connection and so forth, and then you change it on the other place. But then you better remember to, if you want to go back to working it on your upstairs computer, to copy it back from your laptop to the upstairs computer. You got the same issue with ComicBase because ComicBase lives as a physical file on your hard drive. Now, the easy way, if you do this a lot, now I'd say if you do it once in a while, it's just sort of like hey, I want to work at home, but every once in a while I go off to the beach house for 3 months and I still want to have my data with me. Stick it on, copy it over the laptop, copy it back when you're done and done. No muss, no fuss, right? But let's say you do it a lot, where you're always running up and down the stairs, and you want to look at ComicBase from 2 different locations. At that point, it really makes sense to start thinking about getting a network connection, a network drive or something like that. They sell these things they're called NASs, network attached storage. Basically, imagine it's a smart disk drive with a network connection attached to it. A lot of times, people use these for media servers. If you want to put the home movie collection on it or something like that. And you can share it from any place in the house. You could do the same thing with putting ComicBase on a network attached drive. And you can buy them over at Costco for like $150 to get like an 8 gig one of these. Then the idea is that wherever you were in the house, you would open up that storage location from wherever you were, do what you're going to do, exit the program, and when you go and you look at it from the other location, you're still looking at the same file, so you have no problem. It's always in sync. A couple of caveats with this. Caveat number one is SQLite hates what's called UNC paths. Those are the paths that start with // which is to say an old school network location path. Like I have a server called Leland in my house. So if ComicBase lives on the C drive of Leland, it might be // Leland /C / ComicBase database or something. SQLite will give you a can't open file. If you try to do something like that, it won't work. What you have to do if you're going to use UNC paths is you have to use the map network location command in Windows to turn it into a drive letter. So basically take wherever you're sharing your database and turn it into like your Z drive. And you can do that in Windows Explorer. So if it's just on the Z drive of both computers, again, as long as both of them are, neither of them has it open at the same time, it'll work just as if it was like a local hard drive. You're done. And then the final thing I would say about that is it's a really good idea if you're doing your main work off of a network location to save your backups, not to the network location, but save it to the individual computers. That buys you an additional level of safety in that, and let me go ahead and show you where that is on this computer here. So if you go up here and you go to Preferences, by default, ComicBase is always going to save your backups to the same folder as the original database, which in this case that would be your network location. Really good idea if you are working in a networked environment. Change that so it saves all your backups to a particular folder and set the folder to be someplace on your local machine. Now, if both computers, the upstairs computer and the downstairs computer do that, then it's kind of great because what happens is you both work, when you're working out of the same, database, and so you don't need to synchronize anything else. It's all the same place. But when you exit the program, it makes a backup locally on each computer. That way, if God forbid something happens to your network drive, the network drive fails, something gets stolen, something like that, each computer has its own local backup, and so it's going to be easy to roll back and you're protected no matter what happens to the centralized database. So anyway, that's my very long advice for folks sharing the computer. So I hope the person who asked that is answering in, is listening, and that takes care of you. Okay, another question that came up. Competent Man at the top of the thing says, let's see, a question my friend Bob and I have. Whoops, and that's interesting. It's not showing up on program. How do I get that to come on over? Let's see. If I come on over there and I put the key in, there we go. All right. Okay. How am I able to promote and still get new client service for ComicBase, especially with most of the print mags for comic industry now gone? And he had further thoughts about how is the comic industry going to get new customers with the trade magazines all out of print, etc. He mentioned that he saw the same problem in the surf industry with surfing mags. This is, a great question. It's something that we've struggled with it honestly ever since the fall of Comics Buyer's Guide. Gosh, it's so many years ago now. Because we were really tight with Brent and Maggie and John and the rest of the guys over at CBG. They're folks who saw the comic industry the same way we did. We were kind of naturally simpatico as fans, and we really miss when they got bought by FW Publications, then eventually folded. And then later on, actually it wasn't. I forget who went first. I think, did Wizard go before or after CBG? But they went in pretty close order to each other. And then, honestly, it just got to a point where there's really just no magazines that everyone reads in the comic industry anymore. What we've been doing, honestly, is we spent a lot of time, especially back in the day, making sure that when you searched on the internet for comic stuff, that our name would show up at some point. Now, we went around, we spent years and years doing this sort of thing, and it's very frustrating when you're essentially you're trying to make what's called organic search results. So in other words, if you say comic database program or comic software program, you try to make sure that your name shows up there at the top. Now, against that, what can happen, you have two problems. One is you can buy ads, and it could be us, could be somebody else who's in the space, can buy an ad, and they can even like explicitly use the name ComicBase. There's one competitor, they're kind of sleazy, who does exactly that, and it's cool because like it costs them like a bunch of money every time you look for ComicBase and their ad pops up, and if you click their ad, they get dinged for buck or whatever it is, and then you can bounce over and actually get to the site you wanted, which was ComicBase. Everyone does this in the search space. It's the search companies love this stuff, and man, just given how strange the search algorithms are as far as what is the search engine will treat as relevant, you gotta wonder half the time as to whether or not they are gaming things on purpose just to mess with you. If you're in a particular space, whether you sell, art glass jewelry or whatever the thing is, you might be the bestest art glass jewelry place. Everyone in Paris is trading your stuff, and you were the toast of the town, and you could be like number 9 jillion in the search results, unless you first of all indulge in an ever-shifting black art of what's called search engine optimization, which is honestly a huge euphemism on the idea of gimmicking your site in such a way that your name will show up a lot in search results, and also there's any number of other things. Link farming is when you somehow get your name mentioned and links pointing back to your site on a bunch of other associated sites which may or may not have a strong association with what you do. There's a whole science to meta tags and hidden content and the way everything goes. It's ever shifting. Everyone is wargaming on everyone in this space. We did it for, God, well over a decade, playing this one hard and fast. And I gotta tell you, at this point, we do very little. Because it turned out right about the time we stopped caring, and honestly, I was getting pissed off with Google just on other reasons, because I didn't like how they were treating certain free speech issues. We said, you know what? We're just not going to feed the beast today, and we paused all our search-based advertising and things like that. And over the course of the next year, we made exactly the same money, except we didn't write a large check to Google. And then the year after that, we made more money, and we got more organic traffic and so forth. And honestly, maybe if you're like an absolute ninja at this sort of thing, maybe there's some way to beat this thing. I honestly suspect the game is so rigged that there isn't, but I do find that people who are looking for you find you. As long as you are findable in some kind of reasonable way, you know what? The internet is how people find stuff. It isn't so much journalism driven in my experience these days. I really miss when it was, because a lot of my psyche is really based around that. I'm ridiculously happy about the 4.5-star review we got from PC World back in the day when they did a big roundup of comic software, and they were like, yeah, no, you guys, ComicBase is the best. It's like, I'm like, yeah. But the days where like people would do like an unbiased write-up of that sort of stuff, man, they're just about dead. Very few magazines will do product reviews of any category of stuff. There are very few general purpose magazines of any in print of any stature at all that people will pick up and to learn about new things in our industry. The blog sites have filled in a lot of the gap, and honestly, I am thinking about possibly reaching out to some of the folks that we read and say, hey, maybe there's an opportunity there, or maybe we can like court you guys for some journalistic reach and so forth. But it hasn't been something I've really focused on this last year. I will probably get more interested in that after I solve all my other problems. One thing that one of the better pieces of advice I ever got about marketing came from Guy Kawasaki. Was just basically, look, if you want good marketing, start by getting better reality. And so, whatever it is that's pissing people off about your product, or that's turning them off and things like that, try to fix it. And if you knock away enough of the rough edges, then just things get better for you. And so that has definitely been my experience. We had a very painful, long, drawn-out path to get to ComicBase 2021, where we had to rewrite the entire program, use a different database language, use a different development methodology. I mean, it was different everything. But I'm really glad that we're past that. And honestly, we had I'm going to stop short of saying we had a great year last year. We financially did, I have no complaints on that score. I just have complaints about the entire rest of the year, as does I think everyone else. I don't think anyone's going to look back at 2020 and say, "Man, what a terrific year!" I just, if only things could be as great as they were in 2020. So anyway, all right, babbling. Let's move on. More concerning point of what are comic folks going to do when there's no comic books coming out? I don't know. I mean, it's the biggest tendency we've got, I find, when we're trying to predict the future is we kind of take where we're at in the glide path we're on right now and straight line it together, forward into infinity. And in my experience, it just never works out that way. So right now, DC is, there's rumors of them switching to just, getting rid of all the floppy 24 and 32-page comics, replacing them with $9.99, mini trade paperbacks, things like that. I could see that happening. That's how manga is, right? There's nothing against DC's, which is to say Warner, AT&T. There's nothing outside of their stated corporate goals that would, not lead you to conclude that that's where they're thinking right now. But honestly, they'll do it and they'll try it, or if they do it, they could change their mind 2 minutes later and go back to publishing something that looks more like regular comics. Or maybe we'll look at what they're doing and other people will follow. Look, everything morphs all the time. So I'd say the big temptation we really need to worry about is don't get too caught up on the idea like, oh man, we're all doomed because, this one thing is going down. And I will talk a little bit about some of the things I saw in comic shops, because I really made a project of seeing comic shops when I was at down Florida. It's a lot of, there's some things that encouraged me, some things that really didn't. But it was really interesting seeing that a lot of people were just trying lots of different things to kind of keep it all going. So I'd say right now, hold fire. Don't get too caught up in like I say, straight lining the glide path we're on at the moment and into infinity. Honestly, I don't think we're going to know what anything looks like until the coof is over. Because it's it's right now there's so much smoke, of just stores open under funding that they're getting from magic money and things like that, and people who haven't paid rent in a jillion years that are not being kicked out of their apartments, and everything is so not settled down to a baseline right now. I don't think you can tell what anything looks like right now. I think be very, very careful. So that's my gut. Anyway. Okay, so let's see. Unless you're Jeff Bezos, yeah, I'm assuming that's the comment about did everything go well for you this year? Yeah, Jeff had a good year. Jeff, by the way, I don't know if you guys caught the news on him. Jeff is stepping down as the CEO. He's still going to be the grand poobah, things like that, but he's letting the guy who used to run Amazon Web Services take over as the main dude at the company as far as actually running the day-to-day business. And I don't know, man. Bezos created something that no one thought anyone could do. So his story isn't over yet, and he had a hell of a year. I don't know where to go with that one, but I don't think we've seen the end of Jeff Bezos' story either. All right, so where are we at on other things here? All right, so guys, this is gonna be a short one unless I see some more questions in the chat here. But I will give you guys a couple of things about, I have some notes here about stuff I saw on my vacation. So if you have stuff you want to talk about with ComicBase, please post in the chat. Otherwise, I actually wouldn't mind if we did wrap this one a little early because I'm still feeling kind of chill. All right, so some things that were kind of cool. As I mentioned, I saw lots and lots of comic shops. Let me go and pull up the console on that one so I can see so I can actually see how to put these on here. Let's see. Do my macros work? Let's find out. That should be, yeah, that is Comics Emporium down in Panama City, Florida. This picture so does not do this justice because I think it was taken from the perspective of a wide-angle camera sitting on top of the register or something like that. What you cannot see, everything interesting in this picture is off in the far right, and then down that little hallway. If you guys can make out, if you go directly behind the center of the picture and follow, there's a little tiny hallway. You see a police box down there. All the magic, you can't believe everything that's past that point. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any pictures online before the show. But the guy who runs Comics Emporium is the absolute. I'm going to give him the title. He is the king of what's called trompe l'oeil. It's where you fake out using painting and other effects. You fake scenes and effects that are not at all what they appear to be. When you're back in that gaming thing, and again, this is the worst conceivable picture of what's going on back there. There's swords hanging on the wall, and there's actual real items back in his gaming area that it looks like you're in a tavern. It's a fantastic effect. And then down by where the police box is in that little hallway, you're walking down a drape covered, it looks like like a misty cavern, straight out of Dungeons and Dragons. And then you get into the back gaming room, which again, there's like, it's just absolutely fantastic what he's done with the whole thing. About the only thing he didn't do is he hadn't done anything. I was waiting for the part where he would come in and decorate his sports card area like a ballpark or something like that, because that's about the only trick this guy missed. This was absolutely stunning as a store, just in terms of what he did with the paint effects and things like that. It was neat. I was inspired. Anyway, but I did see a number of other really good bookstores, really ranging from traditional comic stores to just traditional bookstores that had heavy comic sections. Wilson's in I want to say St. Petersburg. I believe St. Pete's. Yeah, because I remember the comment someone made out there. It's like, I was asking, what's the difference between Tampa and St. Petersburg? Because they're right across the bridge from each other, and the response from the people on the St. Petersburg side was, St. Petersburg has soul. It's like, wow, cold. Quite the burn on Tampa. I thought Tampa was lovely, but apparently there are parts of Tampa that aren't so lovely. They feature heavily in the Yelp reviews, but when I was touring Tampa, it's beautiful. You're going over this massive bridge over the Gulf, and it's just a beautiful day. Sun sun was just dazzling off the water, and it was just fantastic. I just had a wonderful time. Anyway. But some of the one thing that was interesting is some of the bookstores I saw had actually pulled out of new comic sales, which it's funny because it's almost the reverse of what happened 10, 15 years ago, where it used to be a comic store meant a place where you could buy old comics. You could buy new comics at the 7-Eleven. It didn't matter. So when the direct market came around, comic stores became the place that would have that copy of Superboy or whatever else that wasn't thumbed over by 1,000 mucky kids with gum in their mouth. It would actually be in decent condition, and they'd have a broader range of comics that you could buy. But you wouldn't expect to see old copies of anything at the local 7-Eleven unless they were just back on the racks and somehow they hadn't returned them to the store. Comic stores, their whole mission is they would sell you older comic books. Well, over time, comic stores became the place where you'd buy comics at all, as far as new stuff. And because new comics were getting so expensive and monopolizing so much of the spend of a comic retailer, what you saw more and more over the last, I'm going to say 25 years, is the amount of floor space you'd see in a comic store dedicated to old comics just went down and down and down and down until eventually you got to the point where like the only old comics you'd see in a comic store were basically the ordering mistakes of the folks who were running the comic store. Well, we're seeing, at least I saw, a little bit of the reverse of that this trip, where I'm seeing some people with seems like increasing back issue inventory, even if it was just bulk back stock. But they were dropping new comic sales because everything we talked about on the show about fragmenting the order with DC between DC going off to lunar distribution and losing that ability to have one order form from Diamond and just complicating your life and splitting your, and increasing your shipping and so forth. It just got to be too much. And I saw a couple of what you'd consider a full on comic store that they said, yeah, we don't do new issues anymore. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Now, I guess the end of the story is, well, if I came back there a year from now, would they be doing comics at all? With the old comics that they're able to, lay into. Would they, take up the slack in their budget or not? I don't know, because again, new comic sales, in a traditional comic store, that's so much of what people are spending on. If you took that piece out, do you just lose the floor space and use it for games or something else? I don't know. One thing I definitely did see is, and this is no secret to anyone who's been in a comic store for a long time, is very few just pure comic stores. I honestly, I'm going to say I don't think I saw one where what they had in there was nothing but comics. So there was a lot of emphasis on board gaming, which again, especially with the COOF going around, it's like no surprise there. Especially you sell one board game for $50, you play with a couple friends a couple times, come back, blow another $50 because you're bored out of your mind and looking for something to do. That's not a bad way to go if it's a decent amount of profit involved with that as well. Not quite the same cuts as you see on comics, but I'm not really surprised that that is becoming more of a thing. Pops, Funko Pops seemed like they had largely faded from view. I saw some of the stores that had heavier rotation of new comics and heavier rotation of bulk comics. Still had a lot of Funko Pops going around, but I didn't see a ton of it. It seems like that might be a category, and this is based on just seeing like about a dozen stores or so, might be fading away in terms of product mix. Didn't see a lot of apparel. Seems like maybe Hot Topics taking that one over, but I definitely am used to seeing more places where there'd be racks of Flash T-shirts and things like that. Man, I saw next to none of that. A fair amount of statues, action figures, things like that. Tend to go toward the high end. Not a lot of cheap stuff out there for the kids, but again, not really surprised to see lots and lots of $150 statues on the wall, so forth. And then the other one that's really interesting is just huge amounts of bulk comics. So bulk comics is what I would say it's everyone's buck box, or and sometimes it'd be like 3 for $1 or whatever else, but or buy various combos of if you buy X amount of them, we'll give them to you for less. Tend to be crummy condition. It's funny because it's been so long since I saw anyone with a buck box where I'm from. I went to town more on these things than I probably should have, just picking rando things that just struck my interest, and also because look, you're in the guy's store, you're chatting, things like that. You want to kind of throw him a bone, and so I'm kind of looking for excuses to spend money at people's stores. So saw a fair amount of that kind of stuff. Now, the problem with that kind of comics is I don't know. Let's assume that you paid very little to get the stock in the first place, but traditionally you have a problem with how fast is it moving, and on a given ticket, how many tickets you're writing per day on that, and how much are you making per ticket? My guess is it's not a lot. So it is hard to replace that revenue that the new comics, if those are falling off, it's hard to see where you fill that revenue in from entirely. But man, a lot of people were trying. And I did see a lot of interesting, matter of fact, I want to show this one. This wasn't even a comic store, but I went to a place called, was it Ollie's Discount Warehouse or something? I guess there's a bunch of them around, and matter of fact, there's even some in my area. I've just never been in one. They remind me a lot of, if you guys know, it's like an Amazon, it's like everything you return to Amazon apparently shows up at a place called Bargain Hunt. So every, watch you sent back because the band was, didn't fit, or the cheap earbuds that just, they bought a million of them and they didn't sell them all. They show up at deep discounts at these kind of like, Walmart looking places. It's a combination between like a Walmart and a Goodwill maybe, but it's just all this random stuff. Tend to be fairly heavily discounted. Well, anyway, there's one called Ollie's Discount Warehouse, which I encountered in Birmingham, and honestly, I'm just driving down, I'm just gassing up the car and visiting the restroom and so forth, and I just noticed across the street from this Ollie's Discount Warehouse. What's that? And I'm asking myself, Pete, is there anything in your life you need that is from a discount warehouse? I mean, really? Am I looking for like a new toilet brush or something? It's like, no, I really don't. But but then I said, well, wait a minute, you're on vacation. You're here to see things you haven't seen before. So I went, and I thought, heck with it, walked in. And I'm glad I did, because it wound up being actually, I think, in the way, one of the more interesting detours I took. Basically, as soon as you walk in the door, off on the left was a huge book section. It was kind of like a mini version, if you guys remember Crown Books, but just deeply, deeply discounted books that aren't entirely implausible. So in other words, it's like you take an author like John Sanford or something like that, and who will have written 50 books. Two of them will be on like 78% markdown or something over there. You're not going to find anything in particular that's great, but you'll find a lot of stuff in total that's not entirely garbage, but it's not exactly hot either. But they also had just a stunning number of graphic novels. It was amazing. They had almost as many graphic novels at 70-80% off as Barnes & Noble had, period, which really surprised me because I'm used to graphic novels being so expensive to print that you just don't see them in the cutout bins too much. And so, yeah, no, I saw wall-to-wall cutout graphic novels, including some Superman archives, Superman in Action Comics archives, you know, the hardcover, really beautiful ones from DC. That were like, you know, they're normally $50 and they were like $8. And it drove me crazy because, you know, I'm trying to figure out, just like, oh my God, you know, do I have this one or not? Because, you know, I have a nearly full set, but there's always a couple I can't remember whether I had. And one thing that really, you guys will, if you've ever had this problem and I mocked you for having a crummy phone, I had the same problem happen to me, whereas, you know, I pulled up ComicBase Mobile because I didn't have my tablet with me. And one problem with my particular phone is the ComicBase Mobile, when I went to pull up my issue listing for S's, and S, as anyone will know, is the worst letter by far of any for comic books. Is, you know, star, super, you know, spider, whatever. There's a trillion titles that all start with S. And so anyway, I just gave the worst case scenario to this poor little mobile app on my poor little phone, and I'm in a terrible, you know, internet location, and I couldn't get the thing to scroll down to Superman and Action Comics, and I got tired of waiting for it to refresh, and so I'm like, oh crap, that's my product, I better fix that. So yeah, I had some thoughts on that. You'll see more of that in the future, but yes, I'm looking to have a better check your stock deep in the heart of your S's experience coming back. But anyway, that was interesting to me. Another thing was very interesting to me, and I'm not going to say too much about this, but going back to the idea of bulk comic books, if you guys remember these, you know, being a kid, and you see like the collector's 5-pack, you know, it's like, you know, comics from the 70s to the present, you know, Marvel and DC, or, you know, 5 Batman comics for, you know, for $4, or, you know, 10, you know, independent comics for, you know, $8. Man, saw a ton of that kind of marketing while I was on the road trip. I even saw people doing it with graphic novels, where they were taking the broadsheets, the posters that they mean for people to use as posters in their store windows. And one of the problems if you run a comic store is you get sent 3 or 4 of these every week, and you've already got posters in your windows. And so after a while, you just kind of wind up giving them to customers, or, you know, giving away as freebies to everyone. What we wind up doing around the office is we would use them as Christmas paper for, you know, Christmas wrapping paper for folks. But anyway, what these guys had done is they wrapped up old graphic novels that they hadn't managed to move, and were doing like 3 graphic novels for, you know, $12.99, or, you know, 2 hardback hardback novels and a softback graphic novel for $14, and they'd wrap them up in the old posters that they were given. And so I'll admit, I bought a few of these mystery bags. It was kind of interesting. It leads to some interesting sales techniques, but I'm not sure if this represents desperation or inventiveness or whatever, but it was interesting to see a lot of different ways of selling comic books. So anyway, let me go to the chat here, because I've been yapping for a while. Let's see here. Slider99A says, missing some issues from last week. Is there a delay? Possibly. Now, we do have, so the content indexing gets done out in California, and we did have some shipping delays, I know, from FedEx that held up some things, and we also have a couple of members of the crew right now. We have at least one that's out sick. Hope it's not too serious, but there will probably be a delay pushing out this week's update. So I'll keep you posted on that situation as things develop. I hope it's not too serious. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where, like, some of the symptoms were like the kind of symptoms that nobody wants to be hearing about right now. But we'll figure it out. But, you know, hang tight for now. We'll keep you posted. All right, compliment. Have you by any chance seen or heard about My Comic Shop documentary about a comic shop in Scarsdale, New York, closed in 2015? No, I haven't. That sounds cool. Created a 12-part podcast leading up to the closing, continue the podcast, etc. Neat. I'm gonna have to look for that. Thanks so much for that. I will look for that. Do you know, is it streamable anywhere? If not, I will do some digging around. But anyway, thank you so much for pointing that out. Guys, I mean, I'm fascinated at what it takes to run a comic store. We all, as serious collectors, we're all practically doing anyway. Matter of fact, that's half the people who have comic stores just walked in and said, I like comics. Maybe I could open a store someday. And it's really interesting seeing how everyone handles just, again, I said before, it's one of the most challenging retail situations I could ever imagine. Hundreds of thousands of SKUs, critical, things that make inventorying it hard, conditions and one of a kind items and trouble identifying things. I mean, just there's so many things that make running a comic store just, man, you gotta love comics to want to get into that. The good news is you can occasionally do something crazy like, hey, I spent $1, bought a Spider-Man 129, and I just sold it for however many jillion dollars, 20 years later. You do have things like that happen pretty good. The overall margin with comic books is pretty good, and honestly, the customers are great to chat with and meet, and it tends to be very clubby. But like I say, man, you gotta want to run a comic store to put up with it, because man, if you went into the comic store business thinking, yeah, what an easy way to make money, man, there are a lot of people who got an education otherwise on that. Oh, and or else any place it can be streamed. Apparently free on YouTube. Sweet. Okay, excellent. I will look for that. All right. And the zombies did not get me. No zombies in Florida. Although saw some weird stuff out on the street. I gotta say, I probably won't go into it. All right. Comic book news with Dan Shaheen. Oh, nice. Have I been on this channel? I have not. Dan is one of my LinkedIn buddies. But yeah, it's interesting. I should look in on Dan. It's funny. I was thinking of him the other day, and I can't remember what context. Let's see. Let's see here. Does ComicBase go to any comic shows? We did for almost 30 years. The last one we would do all the time was San Diego. We don't do it anymore. Well, it hasn't been in San Diego for the last year or so, but I don't know that they're going to do one this year. I haven't heard news on it lately. It's been crickets on that front myself. If anyone knows if it's definitely on, let me know, but I'd actually be kind of surprised given the state of California right now. But up until a couple of years before they kind of, shut things down, we were there every year. We were, we were even in like movies with like our Atomic Avenue Rocket and so forth. We stopped doing it honestly because it really morphed as a show. What we were doing with these shows was, we'd be seeing all y'all, and we'd be chatting and like showing everything that's new and doing essentially long form demos of comic software, kind of like we're doing right now. And just honestly, it got to be more of a show where it's more based around the how quickly can I cover everything on the show floor, get all the exclusives, get all the things, and like, and honestly, even though the numbers of people in there were pretty impressive, the number of like our guys, our comic collectors, wasn't as great a number. As a matter of fact, it was declining by the year in absolute terms, because they were kind of getting forced out in the ticket lines by the people who were there for the movie guys or whatever else. So it stopped being like a really good place to do what we do. Yeah, we've done, Chicago is more of a traditional comic show. It's just they're very annoying to exhibit at. I'm not saying we'll never do another comic show, but I really had to come around to the idea that really the best place to show off your wares is probably the internet, doing what we're doing here and things like it. For the same, $20,000 or $15,000 it costs us to take the crew down to Comic-Con, man, you can do a lot of videos and a lot of demos, and that's probably a better place to spend our money. Let's see here. Jeff says, my local comic store packs random comics to sell. Yeah. And about like know what I'm getting. Yeah, it's funny. One of the things I was joking about with the folks where you have these kind of comic packages like that is you can see the comic on the front. You got a pack with the comic on the back, and you kind of say, well, let's see. Yeah, this one's, it's got a G.I. Joe with Transformers on the front. That one looks okay. That one's got a Punisher on the back and everything. And you spend all your time staring through the side of the whole thing, trying to identify comics by the quarter of an inch you can make out on the spine to figure, is this going to be the good pack or the one with like a Woody Woodpecker in the middle of it? And so, man, that's like my whole childhood was, getting really good at identifying, comics by the quarter inch on the spine to figure out, where to spend your hard-earned dollar. Yeah, as I said, dollar singular. But anyway, yeah, a lot of us lived that. I was telling one of the guys on the staff call, it's like I knew a guy who was just spooky. He was really good at buying those Lego blind boxes of minifigs, and he literally could just go into the whole thing, just close his eyes and say, yeah, that's the one with the surfer, yeah, that's the knight, yeah, that's the Robin Hood, because he'd just be feeling with touch, and he could figure out the individual bumpy pieces, which thing it had to be by where the bumps were. Anyway, it's a whole lost art, but it's funny because there is an element to the shopping where it's, if you're not paying a fortune for it, it's just kind of like, it's almost like doing a scratch or lottery ticket. There's something kind of really fun about buying completely random stuff sometimes. Maybe it's a vacation thing, but yeah, there's a little bit of a thrill to it. And you do find a couple good things. You find a lot of garbage, but even the garbage is kind of fun to sort through. So yeah, it depends on what mood you're in. All right, and Greg wants to remind everyone there's a dedicated thread on the CB message boards. And all right, I think this will do this as the last question today, because we're hitting time, and boy, it'd be great to hit time for once, wouldn't it? Are there any common mistakes you and your team see when you submit updates via the submit new or corrected data function? Yeah, there is. And thanks for that. So, if you guys don't know it, let me go ahead and show you what we're talking about here. Anything you've got in ComicBase, and let me just go to one that I can mar up, as we're going here. Okay, so here's Submariner. All right, so let's say I've got Submariner, 56, and I want to change some basic, it says first appearance of Tamara Iran. Well, it's also the first appearance of somebody else, and so you go ahead and you put whatever the change is, and then you highlight it, you right click, and you say, whoops, highlight it, and then you say submit new or corrected data. All right, once you've done that, what happens is it goes over to our editors. Everything in this entire row goes to us, along with information on the title as a whole. It goes to our editors, and they get it in kind of a control panel view, where they get to very quickly see what we've got for the given entry, what you've got for the entry, and then and also who you are. This turns out that's important. And we can very quickly, it highlights in red, here are the things that are different. So they can either tap the individual things, yeah, I like what he said there, I don't like what he said there, and so forth. They can either do that and go through it field by field. They can say, look, I'll take anything this guy had that's new. In other words, it replaces, it's new information that we had nothing for that before. So let's say you said the storyline on a given one was Atlantis Mona Moore, and we had no storyline whatsoever. Now, do we have time to check, through another source whether that really was Atlantis Mona Moore? No, we do not. We're going to take your word for it, especially if there is, if there's not any data previously. Now, let's say, there was previous data, and we had said it was called Atlantis My Love, right? And then we look at your entry, and we sit there and we look at the cover, and maybe it says Atlantis Mona Moore on the cover, in which case we say, okay, I guess this new guy's right. In which case we have to say, well, why is the old guy wrong? And we have to think about it for a second. At that point, your own reputation matters a lot, because we'll look at everything else you sent in, and we're like, well, how detail-oriented is this guy? And let's trust me, the guys who do the corrections on our end, we have our favorites. Whereas like there are people like, when Mark Wade sends in a correction, I'm just gonna take it. I mean, if he, this is the guy who in a trivia competition knew what Superman's license plate, driver's license was. So yeah, I mean, if he says that that's Atlantis My Love, and I had Atlantis Mona Moore, I'm taking it. I'm not gonna think too closely about it. There are other people who, they're crazy people. It's I hate to use all the technical jargon, Psycho Cuckoo, whatever, Cocoa Puffs, whatever. But we're honestly, man, very very little that we would take from them, because they tend to just litter up their entries with just complete garbage. They tend to miss every, they spell Peter J. Tomasi's name, with 3 S's, and whatever the thing is. In which case, very low credibility, and we tend to do a lot of ignoring of things like that. And then there's everyone in between, right? And you kind of like, there are things that will realize you're very good at, Westerns, but you tend to be very poor at, superheroes. There are people we form all sorts of opinions about on things like that. Depending on how much we believe you is how much of your stuff that we'll take and how quickly we'll take it. The worst ones for us are the ones where like, you seem to have some good stuff to say here, but there's a lot of stuff that makes it time consuming. Things that make it time consuming are things when you like when you clutter up your fields that don't, like the notes field, when you clutter it up with a lot of things that shouldn't be in the notes, like, like when you put like the grading notes don't. That's not something that we treat, because we don't care about the grading of your individual copy. But if you like say coupon cutout or something like that, or I stored it in box 27, and you put that in the notes field as opposed to in a custom field or in the grading notes field or whatnot. If you put that stuff in the main notes field, we are going to tend to just ignore all your notes entirely, even if you had good stuff to say, because it's too time consuming to take the good bits that you've got buried in between all the clutter and fish them out of the soup. Other things are, like I say, just put things in the right places. Like if it's just like a Submariner appearance or something like that, put it in the appearances field. Don't put it in the notes field. Notes field is for special appearances. It's for things like the first appearance or the second appearance of such and such a guy, and so forth. Don't put things like in the storylines. Sometimes comic sites will have like a whole synopsis of, in this one, Submariner needs to be reunited with his lost love and go back and fight the villainous plague of the whatever people. Don't write a story and stick it in the storylines field. No, in the storylines field is meant for the storyline, like the name of the story. Use proper punctuation. Don't all cap things. Honestly, anything that people do a lot of that is possible for us to handle automatically, trust me, the correction console's got something that automatically does it. There were people who were submitting tons and tons of foreign storylines that were all just in all caps, because I guess it was too cumbersome to take the caps lock off or something like that. So we have things that'll automatically convert those to proper case and things like that. But don't make our poor editors retype everything you've got. Otherwise, best case, your correction's going to get processed very slowly. In other words, that'll get done after everyone else's correction is done for the day. Or worst case, it just be like, and it just gets ignored. And so if you're submitting things, if the correction guys, if they haven't responded one way or another, like if you haven't seen your point total go up in a couple days, as a result of submitting things, or if they send you notes, also if people are habitually doing things like putting their box numbers in the notes field and it's just driving us crazy, we'll actually write you a nice little note and say, please, keep the box number fields, use a custom field for those and so forth, or don't submit those issues or whatever else. We want to work with you, because honestly, you guys are doing us a great favor on the whole thing, but you also gotta recognize that our poor editors are dealing with literally thousands of corrections per day sometimes, and they gotta work fast. And so if they're retyping everything in the all on their own, they're just not gonna have the time. So they're gonna try to send you a note to let you know, hey, could you not do this, or could you please do that? And if so, they'll get in touch with you. But if you haven't heard back from the folks, and you haven't gotten a note one way or another, it's fair enough to just write a note to support at ComicBase.com and say, hey, what's up? I've been sent some things, but I don't see anything going on. And then start the dialogue, because it could just be they're real busy, or it could be that they were blowing you off and didn't want to have a confrontation. I don't know, but it's worth reaching out. But anyway, those I'd say are the main things to watch out for. Okay, let's see here. According to Oros, Comic-Con will return to San Diego Convention Center July 22nd to 25th, 2021. They say that now. It's weird because one thing about, I mean, look, I hope you're right, but one thing that usually has happened before that date by a lot of months is, I mean, there's just a lot of prep work that gets sent out to everyone, you know, the pros and the vendors and things like that. And I have seen none of that so far. So I'll keep my ear to the ground on that one. Honestly, if I haven't heard anything by the end of February, I'll ping further on it. I think that's their plan, but for me to believe it, I think I gotta see more noise, because, man, Comic Con is such a it's you're bringing a large city into a large city in order to put on Comic Con. It's such an event, that you usually see a lot of storm and fury surrounding it. So before I believe it's really on, honestly, before I believe any large event is really on, I think I want to see more. Okay, well, anyway, I think that's about it for me, you guys. Let's see. Yes, okay. And he says, yeah, good news. You sent an email. We're consistently sending updates incorrectly. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, thanks guys for everything. Next time out, we'll probably have a little bit more of an agenda of these ones. But thanks for tuning in. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And I'll see you guys next time.